Welcome to the iNETrepreneur radio show. We are so honored to bring you your host, the ultimate celebritypreneur, connecting businesses and celebrities worldwide. Winner of the Networking Organization of the Year, best-selling author, magazine publisher, trainer, and owner and founder of Network Together and the iNETrepreneur Media Network from magazines, TV, and radio network. We're excited to bring you your host, Mr. Robert W. Jones.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the show today. And I always love that introduction it's just a fun introduction that kind of gets the show off onto the right mark. And, today we're going to be talking about a few things that I think are important. And maybe we don't always talk about these things, but that really is something that needs to be talked about. And that's about exposure. And for many businesses, exposure is really the one thing that starts it all off. And as I was talking to our guests, Emmie and Brian, I say this many times. I mean, without exposure, there probably wouldn't be a McDonald's. And, they don't make the best burgers in the world. They don't have the most attractive facilities in the world. But they do one thing I think that just is an amazing, better than anyone else. They create a feeling of brand that, quite frankly, everyone knows. And that's what it's about. Exposure is the first step, of being known as being an expert, in something that you do. And, from your exposure, it goes into, bringing in, clients to start those conversations. And after that, you go from conversations to actually clients who have start spending money with you. And so that's really important. But before I get on with today's first guest, I want to cover a few things that we have. Please subscribe to our channel at youtube.com/iNETrepreneur radio. Again, that's YouTube.com/iNETrepreneur radio. And yes, I get a lot of people saying, iNETrepreneur, I can't even spell it. Well, that's okay. All it takes is one spelling. You can bookmark it in your phone, bookmark it in your browser. And guess what? All you have to do is click on it and you'll be able to find us each and every time. Plus, if you subscribe, you'll get a notification that we're alive and well. So, please do that. I also want to remind everyone that we also stream live through Facebook. We have facebook.com/again, iNETrepreneur radio, and you can find us there. And, we stream on quite a few different outfits. We keep growing, each and every week. It seems like more people are finding us. And I'm really excited about the growth of not only the radio show, but the magazine that we have, the membership side, and even our academy. We're starting to get recognition worldwide. And again, it all starts with the first thing I talked about on this show, and that's exposure. And, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to bring on my first guest, and I'm really excited to have her on. We've talked for quite some time, and my first guest is Emmie Saavedra. Hi, Emmie. How are you?
Hello, Robert. So great to be here. I'm really feeling great and doing great. Thank you.
Well, I can't imagine you never not feeling great, looking great, doing great, being great. And a long time ago, I remember in our first conversations, I had talked to you and I said, I think what you have is something more than even mindset. To get to that mindset, you really have your heart set. And your heart is of the type of entrepreneur, business owner that really puts themselves out there to help others. And that's what I really like, about knowing you. And I know sometime back, Sean and I were talking about, all of the people who have really supported us in the way that we feel is just holistic. And I mean, not just the H, but I'm talking holistic. One of the first people we've talked about was you, Emmie, and I didn't know if you knew that.
No, but thank you. Now I know.
You do. And I think it's really, really important that, everyone gets to know that. I'm doing some settings here, but the thing we're talking about today is, something I think that matters to you a lot. You are not, English is not your first language, is it?
No, I grew up in the Philippines, so Filipino, and then I'm of Chinese origin. So in our home, we are actually what you call mandated to speak the Chinese language. So just imagine that, right? So no, you're right.
And that's something that I think that we tend to do. In our culture, sometimes we tend to group people so broadly, and we think that there's actually, in many other countries, there's a lot of ethnicity in other
Mhm.
countries. The United States is not really the only melting pot. And when it comes to marketing, when it comes to sales, when it comes to technology and languages and even currency, there's a lot of factors to really look into when you're actually, attempting to spread your word, outside, your backyard, let's say. And what I think that you have that you understand in such ways that a lot of maybe, marketers and people who train in sales don't understand is, being from the Philippines, having Chinese descent, those cultures aren't the same. They're very, very different. And then coming over to the United States, tell us a little bit about, your path in seeing through your lens, through your eyes on what culture looks like to you.
Well, so you're talking about, it's very interesting, right? I love the subject of culture because it's really what defines you and strengthens you. If you embrace it, you grow. If you don't embrace it, you still stay small. And so my own journey was actually very interesting. We are of Chinese descent. My grandparents migrated from China to the Philippines years ago. So my parents were born in the Philippines and I was born in the Philippines. However, the culture was really what I said, it's what defined you. It really is what's defining for me because I never thought of myself as a Filipino. I was brought up there. I never did because in our household, in our family, the culture of the Chinese people was so much what was dominating, right? We speak Chinese. We could only, have Chinese friends. Our whole family is Chinese. You cannot even marry someone that's not Chinese. So it was very conservative in a sense, and yet very um, tight and small, right? That's how they preserve it. They have their own point of views, right, Robert? Like everything in life is about perspective. And so when you're talking about cultures, they're also locked into their own perspectives of their view of the world. And so that was really me. And my interaction with Filipinos were very minimal, although we were in the country that's owned by the Filipinos. And so in school, we studied English because English was all over, this books, all that. And then I came to this country out of a dream and a desire to be really getting out of that culture where I can really grow and be exposed to everybody else. So when I stepped into this country, you need to enculturate yourself again in this whole Western world. So it
Right.
was, yeah, it took a while, Robert, right? To learn a new
Well,
culture and live it
Well, I
is
mean,
a
that's why
journey.
it's really, really important to kind of, go through here when, because you're talking about you had a tight knit family, it's kind of like a small community, and instead of breaking down barriers in a way, you came from this kind of tight knit community, this small group that actually was putting up barriers. It was actually keeping you from being able to express outside your own world. I mean, you can only marry Chinese, do
Mm-hmm.
business with Chinese, have friends that are Chinese. You're in the
Mm-hmm.
Philippines. You're segregating yourself out. I mean, my goodness, I couldn't imagine, trying to be in a small community here in the United States when there's all this opportunity. The marketplace can get pretty small quickly, can it?
Absolutely. That's why this is a perfect place to grow and develop oneself, right? Where
You know,
else?
Well, so I, there's very few people that just grow up and they say, "Hey, I'm just going to break out of this mold and I can see things differently." Because sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and there had to be someone early on in your life that maybe had mentored you, or you saw them and you thought, boy, they just do things a little bit differently. Was there anyone like that early on in your life, or you kind of thought like, if they can do it, I can do it?
Well, it's not a person in particular, but I have to give credit to books. Like my love of reading actually opened up a whole new world into my desire and dream of coming to this country and really living the lifestyle here. No, if anything, around the people I was with, it made me realize like I'm really locked in and I have a way out. And, delving in books, Robert, actually opens up your world and vision. And then you're never the same, because once exposed, there's no going back. So I really give it to the benefit of the authors, the books, everything that I learned. And then that really paved the way. And then people around you support you in the sense that they can also have you open your eyes to what's missing and what you would love to have in your life. So I think kudos to everyone around me.
Yeah, and which is really interesting, because that really does come from more your internal care set, not necessarily an external care set, and it came from like a desire of you really wanting to help others. And I think, what I look at in many people, why I like to look at the background, is because they're also like pre-indicators of who you become, later in life. And when we talk about why do business with you, it's because you have a whole fabric of a personal foundation that started years and years and years ago. So when you come in and you walk into the room and you say, hey, I'm a trainer, or I'm a teacher, or I can coach you, or I understand. I mean, you're not just talking about understanding in those moments. You're talking about understanding from having a lifetime of experiences and a lifetime of perspective that you're able to aid, your clients. Wouldn't that be correct?
Oh, absolutely. You got it 100% on the spot, right? Like, it's really the lived experience of life that makes you a richer person, a person who can share more, a person of more interesting person, right, Robert? And to me, it's like you can put me anywhere in the room. I can be with anybody because I come with, rich in experience, rich in just exposure. Like you said, exposure is everything. Like, I love it.
And by breaking out, I mean, sometimes, it's not just being the new person in the room. It's like, one of my coaches says, just imagine never doing business, never being in Tokyo before. And all of a sudden, you're doing business in Tokyo. And if you've never been there before, you have to learn, the customs. You have to learn the etiquette. It's not just about the business. It's being able to be a part of and not be an outsider. And I think that's where I think with some of the training that you have and what you do at the Champions Institute, you're able to understand by, maybe you are the only Asian in the room sometimes. Maybe you were the only female. Maybe you're the only one that came in from abroad. There's probably a lot of different things that you can understand, the subtleties to where, I can feel myself, I'm physically different, but you also had to create conversations with other people so they could get to know you, right?
Totally. It's all about connection. Like that book behind you, it's about connection.
It really is. And that was to give, hope, inspiration, and support to other entrepreneurs and business owners. And that's why it matters. But I think what you do is you work with business owners and entrepreneurs so they feel, again, that they matter in any given situation. One of the things that really, I think I'm appalled sometimes. I think that's the best word to say is, I look at the media, the mainstream media, and they're just creating all these divisions between people. In true business doesn't look at dividing and conquering. True business looks about like adding and cooperating. And I think that's what you do in your training. But you go deeper than that. What you do is you look at even down to personality types, then knowing that there's basic personality types in every human being. And if we get to understand that more readily and more quickly, and we can find those identifiers, we can start speaking each other's language, even, much faster. Even if we're both speaking English, we can actually make English work for us better. Correct?
Absolutely. So good. Like, it's really right. Like, it's bringing awareness to the differences of every human being. So when you spoke of personality, Robert, so I believe and totally stand by, I teach about the 4 different personality types, and we're wired differently. So the access to recognizing how one person naturally responds and communicates and listens differently than you or me is always the access to transformation. And when there's an access, there's a connection possibility. And inside connections, there's relationships. And then anything gets created, including businesses that can last you for a lifetime, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important. So much of the time, and I say this from my own personal life, I'm half Mexican American, or I would prefer to say I'm American of Hispanic or Mexican descent, and I'm also of an Anglo descent of Welsh. And so, I've kind of walked through this different tug of war at times between, these microcultures within the American culture, but at the end of the day, that's all outside stuff. That really doesn't get me closer to a conversation with you, or closer to a conversation with Brian, who's coming up later, or closer to a congressperson that I could meet, at a town hall. I mean, quite frankly, the more that we concentrate on the outside of who we are, the less we can really concentrate on the inside of who we are. Wouldn't you agree?
Totally. So you're really speaking to seeing each other and interacting to the humanness of every human being. And that is right on point.
Yeah.
And if we can master that, Robert, anything and everything is possible between two.
Yeah. And I think, where I want to go is, on this show today, because people always think about automation as being the tool to succeed. And, a lot of people think about systems as the tools that, will help you succeed. But, I like to say it takes a system before you can get to the system, or it takes some habits before you can create the automation. And a lot of that is just messaging. Really, people ask me all the time, they're like, well, why should I worry about networking? Why should I get out there and meet people? Why should I present in a room? And it's because that is the way that you can learn the proper messaging to create a connection to your audience. And it just, because quite frankly, the thing is if there's you and me, or there's you and me and 10,000 people, when we're actually speaking, we're speaking a message one-on-one to everyone that hears that voice. And what I like about what you have in the system that you offer people is you help them translate the confusion, and you bring clarity by understanding to go deeper than just the looks of the people, or the pitch of the people, or the dialogue of the people, but actually understanding what words create meaning for them. Tell us a little bit about the system that you have, Emmie.
So the system I have is that I teach the power of connection, right? Like, how do you bring out the best in people to be a top producer, to be a relationship rock star, right? How do you get yourself to be the best relationship connector or manager? So inside that, we teach everybody to build confidence. And how do we build confidence, Robert? And if you really look, right, Robert, you get these questions from your friends and networking people. Why? Underneath it all, if you really peel off the onion layers, underneath it all is some kind of fear, some kind of anxiety, confidence issue maybe. So what I do is that I have them be seeing people as who they are, and then building their own confidence to learn how to connect with each other based on what's important to the other person. So if you can get to know how does that person listen and speak, and what can make them listen to you, I promise you, the issue about being visible, being out there in front of people will become very comfortable and very effective. And guess what? That's how businesses get stronger and grow. You got to be visible, because if not visible, then your message and products cannot be seen or heard.
No, and it's very key when you talk about a word that's dear to me. It's conversation. After you get to the connection, the next steps are really conversation. And it's that conversation that leads to, someone turning into a client, or someone turning into a colleague, or someone turning into a trusted advisor. I think it's so important that we start putting more efforts into our conversations, because, here's the thing. In my background, when I worked as a programmer and a coder, what we did, we took so much time to understand the language of conversations, and that's what we automated. And so many entrepreneurs don't understand the power of their own conversations. And in fact, many entrepreneurs, the first thing they try to do is they try to give away their own voice. They try to hire a salesperson or get a VA or have someone do all this. And the unfortunate thing is no one has your conversation. No one has your voice. Only you know what you know. And it's very, very powerful. What are some of the personality types, Emmie, that you train people to look for and to help them actually debunk the myth of people's, I guess would say, trepidation of actually conversing? Because I believe that your system helps them overcome that barrier.
Absolutely, and 100%. So here we go, Robert. There's 4 different personality types, and that exists in every one of us human beings. So there's a blueprint, there's an action part of us, there's a nurturing part of us, and there's a knowledge part of us. Now, the sequence of where they lay dominant in each of us is different. So let's say you need to speak to the first 2 top codes of a person, and then try to steer away from the last 2 codes, because that's really what tripwires the no, and you want people to be a yes to you. So let's take, for example, a blueprint. How do you communicate with the blueprint, and what's your expectation of a blueprint? When you're talking to a blueprint, you want to be very professional, like really very calm, and you also expect them to be a little cooler than a lot of people, even colder, like a little bit more detached, because they're logical. They're in their head, they analyze everything. Right? So that's 1 tip and 2 tip. So when you're talking to an action person, Robert, you're talking a little about me, right? So you want to be energetic. You want to also be about opportunities, like what's there, and you want to get straight to the point. So that's what they might seem hurried to you, but that is how an action speaks, different from a blueprint. Now you're talking to a nurturing. The nurturing, how you speak to the nurturing is always warm and fuzzy, and they give a hug, just really very warm and friendly. And if you look, that's not a blueprint, that's not an action, but that's distinct to a nurturing. So how do they buy from you? A nurturing will only buy from you if you look very authentic and if you really show care, which is emotion. All right, so totally different. So let's take the last code, which is the knowledge code. Knowledge code is all about analysis. So if you meet a knowledge person, chances are they're, again, like the blueprint, a little colder, a little detached, because they're usually in their own head analyzing things. So how do you influence a knowledge person? You influence a knowledge person by exhibiting your expertise. You gotta be a master of what you do. Perfection, accuracy is what they're looking for. So it's very important to learn all 4 different personality types so you can connect and bring out your personality type anytime, according and matching the person across you.
Yeah.
This is key.
Yeah, and it's really, really important, because I know when people talk to me about personality types, sometimes they get stuck in other areas. Because you can also look at personality types, but there's also IQ. Each blueprint, action, nurture, and knowledge. There's also different types of intelligent levels between each one. And this is personality. It's not saying that that they have the Einstein IQ. I mean, this is actually how to relate to them at any level, no matter what their IQ. And the other thing that we hear a lot about is EQ. Your emotional quotient, and how connected or disconnected. You could say, well, maybe a nurturer has a little bit more EQ, but I think what I really get down to, and I think we talked about this some time back, is what we're looking really to do is not look at just the IQ or the EQ. We're looking at the CQ. What is your motivation to be able to talk to, these differing personalities within your own community? And if you understand how to talk with these differing personalities within your own community, not only are you able to be able to articulate who you are and what you do, you're actually getting to mind and understand what they want and need. Isn't that correct, Emmie?
That's always the key. Is about the other person. They actually, when you do the personality types like I do, Robert, the person across you actually tells you what they value and what will make them say yes to you. Reverse technology, reverse engineering, the magic.
Well, and I think that's just the and Stephen Covey said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And really one of the major factors in that really comes down to value. And if you have someone sitting across the table and or across the Zoom or in any medium, I think if you're feeling valued, that's the first step of going towards something which is I think invaluable, and that is loyalty, that is trust, that is bond. And that's what businesses spend, some of them billions of dollars each year, on trying to create trust, raving fans for what their vision is, for that community, wouldn't you say?
Oh, totally, right? Like Coca-Cola spends 4 billion a year in marketing, and you wonder why.
4 billion, and it's really funny that you bring up Coca-Cola. There's a soccer superstar named Ronaldo,
Mm-hmm. Cristiano.
Cristiano Ronaldo,
Mm-hmm.
and there's this meme, and there's this picture, and he had the Coca-Cola, and he pushed the Coke away, and he brought out the water, and he's like, "No, this is what you drink." And from what I heard, Coke, hit a dive in their stock prices or something like that, and it really leads back to the same thing. Now that might be like a macro influencer, but when you come to your own community, the bonds are even stronger. And so what you say and what you do and how you offer it, I mean, they do resonate with others around you, don't they?
Totally. And you talk about critical mass. Community is a critical mass. If you can get the power of a community, then you win. And everybody wins, right? That's what you're building here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so along with the training about learning about the personality types, what are some of the things that you do? I know you put on some events, and I know you do some coaching. Tell us a little bit about the events and the coaching services that you have.
So the events that we have, firstly, we do free webinars, Robert. So they come in for 45 minutes, listen to the webinar. I can show them a little bit of what there is. And so we have the courses that we offer as well. So inside that, we do the sales tips on how to be masterful in communicating. So we also have events in town, and we partner with other communities as well. I'm the global business connector for the Women Speakers Association. So what I do is that I also connect with other leaders in the community, and together let's create events and add value to both our communities and have everybody win. To me, if it's not a win-win, I'm not playing the game. Yeah. Right? That's really what's important, because our commitment, I'm sure this is yours too, our commitment is to have every human being thrive. Everyone that's in our circle that we can reach, let them thrive and be successful. And let us be the leaders for that, Robert. So that's really what I do. So I do pretty frequently those events as well. And I do a lot of volunteering and assisting as well. And you'll be surprised to know, you might not, but I do a lot of self-growth and development training as well for myself. As a leader, you got to do that.
Yeah, and I think that is very important, and I do the same as well. I always say, they always talk about, half full or half empty. For some people I've seen, they just turn the cup upside down, and there's nothing worse than that. Put that cup, right side up, and keep it ready and willing to take in information and take in energy around you. And I think that is, here's a saying I said, it seems like the older that I get, the more I don't know, so the more I seek to know. And I think that is a pretty apt phrase for what I see in you, Emmie, is, you if you don't have the answers, or you don't have the ability to serve someone yourself, you are the first one to go out and find someone who can. And I really appreciate that about you. And it reminds me of the old adage, it's not about, feeding the person, it's actually teaching them to feed themselves.
For sure. And Robert, there's nothing like humility. So if there's something you don't know, don't fake it. be honest and say, Robert, I really don't have the answer to this question. However, I'll find this out for you. I'll get back to you tomorrow and I'll ask an expert. Right? And so that's really what we do. So you spoke about my course, what I teach, Robert. So what is really important is I teach how to be influential. I teach how do you influence others to see things your way without making them wrong or making yourself wrong, right? Like, how can you influence someone to be a yes to you? How do you influence a child to say yes to cleaning up his countertop, right? So those are the things that's important.
You got to tell me the secret, Emmie. You have to tell me the secret. How do I do it by 300%? Tell me.
Well, you'll see that in my course.
My gosh.
No, for you, you get it. It's free for you because I know your heart, Robert, and that's who I am and who you are. Just remember, I'll just give a little tip on that. There's 4 major personality types out there. And if you can only speak to your own letter, you know what? You're actually discouraging the communication, of worth with the other letters. So, learn from Emmie. She's a beautiful, wonderful teacher. Emmie, I have your information scrolling across the banner here. Is there any other ways that people can get a hold of you or get in touch with you? Sure. I'm in Facebook. I'm in LinkedIn. You can, go to my website, Champions Institute, contact us. And hey, Robert, there's always you. People can always get to you, and you know where to get me anytime because my life is open to you because I really treasure and respect you and honor you. And Sean.
Thank you. Well, we also have the Art of Connection Summit coming up. It's a global event. It's on September 21st, 22nd. It's a 24-hour event. It's a world event. And Emmie, you're going to be on starring in that event as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in September as well again.
Yes, can't wait. Can't wait to make a difference to a lot of people's lives. And that's who we are. Thank you, Robert, for such an amazing job you're doing for the world. Seriously, thank you. And you and Sean.
You're going to make me blush, but I'll take it. Emmie, thank you so much again for being on the show today. I appreciate you so much. You're a tireless worker. So many people look up to you, including me. I appreciate you so much. And, just have a great day today.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Robert. Bye-bye.
Network together. It's all about connections. Expand your sphere of influence. Build relationships. Be part of something bigger. Be part of Network Together.
I always have to smile when I finish talking with Emmie, especially if we're on the radio or a phone call, because it's almost awkward because it's like we're talking so much and I have all these thoughts coming and there's so much more to talk about. And it's just like, but I don't want you to go because, I want to learn so much more. She either knows someone who knows, or she knows herself, or she's going to find out for you. I mean, what an amazing, heart that she has to give to entrepreneurs and small business owners in this space. And speaking about hearts and business owners that are in this space, my next guest is Brian Wright. And I'd like to introduce Brian onto the show right now. Hey, Brian, how are you doing?
Robert, good to see you.
Good to see you as well. I always, just like Emmie puts a smile on my face, I have to admit, you always put a smile on my face too, Brian.
Oh, well, thank you.
And there's many reasons for it. One of the things that I think about when I speak of you, Brian, and I speak about the industry that we're in, because we do cross paths a lot, and we're around quite a few influencers and trainers and speakers and high profile people, but sometimes the who you think they are is not really the who you are. And both you and I have noticed that in our years of being in this business. And one of the things that I found out with you, Brian, is when it comes to doing what you say and saying what you do, you are one of the good guys in the industry that delivers. And if something comes up, you don't hide. You pick up the phone. You drive in your car. You get that carrier pigeon to get out to you. Something. You're going to make it happen. And that is what I really appreciate about you, Brian. Is you really speak and show well for the industry that we live in.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I think reputation means a lot. And character means a lot. So if you don't have that, then no one's going to play in the sandbox with you very many times.
No, and that's where it's like I would rather continually work with someone who has your diligence than to continue to find someone who may not have that same diligence. And I think that's what's helped accelerate the growth of the iNETrepreneur network is finding the right people and working side by side in our lanes to both further each other and those that we serve. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's tiring to keep having to look for someone new to work with. If you just have a strong bond with someone that you like, know, and trust, that's priceless. You don't find a lot of people like that, unfortunately.
No, and sometimes it seems like it gets rarer, but then there's always a surprise that always kind of pops up on into view at different times. I don't think a lot of people know you, Brian, that you're a transplant. Now, and I'm transplanted from a culture. She's her I guess her family's from China. She grew up in the Philippines. She decided to kind of break the mold of living in the Philippines and come into the United States. And sometimes I think that people forget that the United States is a very, very large country.
Yeah.
And you actually have almost, micro cultures just within, the states ourselves. And, Iowa, I've lived in Iowa myself. In Iowa and Minnesota, Iowa and Arizona are very, very different in their cultures, aren't they?
Yeah, and I also spent some time in Nebraska. I find about Iowa and Nebraska in particular is the sense of community they have around each other is just very noticeable.
Yeah,
it's great. I mean, when you come from a small town, the community bands together, people help, love, and support each other. When my dad passed a few months ago, I was really amazed, not surprised, but amazed at how much support our family received, love and hugs and, wanting to help with things. And it was really, really great to see. I got to spend some time at home with my mom during that time. And it's great. I'm going to go back again in a few weeks and spend a couple weeks with her again in Iowa. But yes, Iowa is a very different place. And when you grow up in a town of 2,000 and then you move to a community like Phoenix that has several million in the metro area, it's different. Even in Phoenix itself, there are different communities. Mesa is a lot different from Scottsdale, and that's a lot different from Apache Junction. I feel like in Apache Junction, love Apache Junction, but you're stepping back several decades in time when you cross that county line to Pinal County, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, Queen Creek, lived in Queen Creek, and that was at once an outlying area, and the community here is really kind of congealed together in a way. But a lot of people we're so often to like put people in buckets, and I'll just go a little bit beyond cultural. I'll go to race. They all white guys are the same, and all black women are the same, and all Hispanics are the same, and when it really gets down to it, it's kind of like Emmie and I were talking about. The worst thing that you can do in business, and I think in life, is just to put people in these big, broad buckets and make it like everyone's the same.
Right.
Quite frankly, we are not the same. And I know even for my life, I feel like I have my own bucket as well. I'm, like I told Emmie, I'm half Hispanic, and then I'm half Anglo, and there's certain bits and pieces of culture that I have from both, and it's made me both sensitive and has desensitized me a little bit. And quite frankly, Martin Luther King said it's the quality of your character, not the color of your skin. That should really be looked at. And I think so much of the time in our media, creating opposition between people is so much of a ratings winner than actually when we get together. It kind of reminds me of the drug industry. It's like, you don't want to cure people, because if you can cure them, you can't treat them anymore. If you're not treating them anymore, you don't make any more money. So I think that we really have a culture that just kind of turned upside down a little bit, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when your industry is predicated on creating a customer instead of actually helping them permanently, that there's something a little slimy about that.
Well, and it goes back to a lot of its profit. And Brian, for myself, being a programmer, and I say this a lot because I want people to know kind of like what they did. I get asked the question, when's AI going to take over the world? Artificial intelligence, and I say in certain ways AI is already taken over the world, because all the algorithms that corporate directors, many of them utilize, doesn't take in the human factor, of perseverance and resilience and collaboration, between people. The algorithms are really all geared to extract as much money as you possibly can from the clients that you have.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so important for small business to remember, and entrepreneurs to remember, they're actually the opposite of that. And that's why it is so important to dive in personalities and understanding how we communicate. And it also is very important for business owners and entrepreneurs to also understand the PR and promotion game. Wouldn't you say so?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have to gain exposure for your business. If no one knows who you are, you can't help anyone. So you think of the world of music, and, bands that were underground until they broke it big, bands like REM, for example, people accuse them of selling out because they went mainstream with some songs and became well known and loved by everybody. Well, no, it's not selling out. They just figured out a way to get known, and they could impact more people with their music, and they did very well after that. But there's a difference between doing something for the sake of art and doing something just for the sake of money. I think you can do both and change a lot of people's lives.
Well, and I had actually talked to Emmie about this the other day. I said, I think we need to design something a little bit different, and that's, be the prophet, of your profit. And I think many times, what makes a prophet, it's because, they lead, they engage, they have a vision, they create a voice, they have a following, they speak to a greater good. They want to be a part of something bigger, and taking religion out of it. That's what a prophet does. They do something that matters, but that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be profit either. Because, one of the things that I found out in my life is to be able to give, you have to have.
Yeah.
And I think that that's very, very important. And, I call it the airplane that's going to crash into the mountain. They always say you have to give the mask of air to you first before you can even put it on your child, because if you're passed out, the child has no, no help at all. And I think
Right.
that that's the first thing that we need to understand. Profit is a form of currency and exchange, where we give to each other. And I think that you do a lot of that as well. So keeping on exposure, Brian, tell us a little bit about, why, when you have that talk with potential clients, you're in the exposure game. What are some of those conversations? What do they look like?
Well, I think a lot of people want the extra exposure, and, it's interesting. Everyone loves free exposure, of course. There are some people I run into who think they shouldn't have to pay for it because of who they think they are. And what's interesting is I do give free exposure to people who have a massive, massive audience. Someone like a Sharon Lechter, I'll do that for because I enjoy having her audience tag along. Other people, we all have to pay our way. I mean, this industry is a pay-to-play game. It just is. We're not required to like it, but it is true. And just because you want to like something doesn't mean it's not true or is true. It just is. So you have to do that. I mean, I'm in a media mastermind, and the connections I'm getting in that media mastermind are priceless, but I have to pay to be in that group. So you do have to pay to play. You just have to. And if you're not willing to do that, it's going to be really tough for you to get your name known. Even if you decide, to pay for Facebook ad, you're still paying for exposure. And, a lot of my business, I get organic Facebook posts through the relationships that I've built, but I've still paid because some of these relationships I've built are with people that I was introduced to or people I met at events. So there's always a pay to play aspect to it. I mean, you're not going to build a multi-million-dollar business for free. It just does not happen. And anyone who thinks that it's going to happen that way might be waiting around for it for a very long time.
But in a multi-million-dollar business takes people.
It does. It takes a lot of people.
It takes a lot of people. I mean, you need to have staff. You need to have agents. You need to have producers. You need to have content developers. All these things, require money, and they have lives and they feed families. And no, there is a cost of doing business. That's why they call it cost of doing business. Yeah. And I think sometimes, a lot of people, they forget that, if you put on a stage or you put out a magazine or you put on a radio show that, everyone else should pay but them, but I've always had the thing, my philosophy is, if we all pay together, then we can all play together. And if we all pay and play together, then the price goes down tremendously because we're really sharing in the expense, that gets all of us out there. There's no better winning than that because we all succeed that way, don't we?
Right. Absolutely. And when everyone does contribute, that helps. And that's why compilation books are so popular, for example. Everyone pitches in a little bit, and now there's a bigger pot of money that can be used for marketing. It can drive sales. It can drive Amazon rankings, and you can all leverage that book for your own advantage. You can call yourself a #1 best-selling author. And we all can say that. I can say that a few times.
Well, and it's great that you bring that up because when it comes to our magazine or when it comes to our book, that book took the iNETrepreneur network concept into 12 different countries and 27 different states in a time where, Sean and I, we were like wondering what could we do? I mean, we have an all in-person networking organization primarily in the state of Arizona. And then all of a sudden in an 18-month period, we went from that to being virtual, to having a magazine, to have a radio show, to have an international best-selling book. All that came about because of hard work.
Yeah.
But it all came about because we were paying dues, and we were also paying for a lot of stuff in other ways. And, that compilation book, I had a lot of people come back to me and they said, thank you. If it wasn't for that one page, and this is what really floors me, Brian, I call it like the marathoner, before they become a champion marathoner, they still have to put on their shoes for the first time. Right. Mm-hmm. And, just by writing that one page, I had so many people come back to me. I'd say probably 20 people, that's still quite a bit, come back to me and say, if it wasn't for that page, I wouldn't be doing this next project. I wouldn't be doing this next book because now all of a sudden, why has my mental fog, why has that head trash kept me from it? Same with the magazine. And so many people think like, well, if I get in your magazine or I get in your book, I'm not picking up clients, but you pick up confidence. And let me tell you something, just like Emmie says, if you don't have confidence, you're not picking up clients.
Right. And it is your job to leverage what you're doing. So if I have a #1 Amazon best-selling book, which I have 2 of them on my own, and I've been part of others, you have to leverage that. It's in my bio now. If you've been on national television, if you've gotten media, I was on the list last year. I did a 2+ minute segment on 3 things you can do to get started writing your book.
Yeah.
It's that media clip isn't just sitting there. In fact, I show that to people who are thinking of working with me, and I'll say, watch this. It's only a couple minutes long. You'll get some ideas. And people have come back and said, oh my gosh, I took notes. I actually took notes. I want to work with you. Priceless.
Well, and I always say, one of the things about the academic, community is they call it a curriculum vitae, and a curriculum vitae kind of goes through like a dossier of everything that you've done in your life that of meaningful and meaning and purpose. And it's the same way. We kind of really use the LinkedIn profile to look for meaning and purpose that you've done. Have you been on a TEDx stage? Have you been on these podcasts? Have you contributed to a magazine? Have you been in a best-selling book? When you're really getting right down to it, people do look for people who have paid the price, and they show that, through the tally marks in a LinkedIn profile or in a bio, or even when they get up on stage, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to use everything that you're doing. And the really smart people aren't just thinking about themselves as an author, speaker, coach, trainer, consultant. They are thinking about themselves as a marketer. James Malinchak says this very famously. You're not in the speaking business. You are in the business of marketing your speaking services. You're not a writer. You're in the business of marketing your writing services. And insert whatever it is you do. You have to think like a marketer and not like the thing that you actually do for a living. When you do that, your life changes.
Yeah, and it changes rather rapidly. And I think that that's why sometimes people hit a barrier. When we talk about small businesses and we talk about entrepreneurs, and, many entrepreneurs really are freelancers. They do for themselves, and they will only grow to the ability of them to fill their own calendar. An entrepreneur expands beyond that. An entrepreneur doesn't fill their own calendar. They have an insatiable desire to fill their own calendar, and to fill their calendar, and to fill their calendar, and to fill their calendar. Yeah. And that's what starts creating the organization.
Right.
An entrepreneur is not here to just serve themselves. An entrepreneur is really, if they have, in my opinion, their mind right, they're here to serve the greater good of society. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And it does take a team. In fact, I hired my first VA recently. And so not only do I have to keep myself busy, which is never really an issue, but now I have to make sure someone else is busy full time. And so now there's an extra burden. It's like, okay, what can I have her do tomorrow?
Yeah.
And so sometimes I have to scramble. I mean, I have ideas in my head. So it's always an interesting game that you're playing with yourself, is how do I keep this person busy to justify keeping them on the payroll? And, a couple weeks in, it's not been hard. I have a lot of things that this person can do for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of it is, I'm an advocate of journaling, and when you journal your processes. Look at what your processes look like, and then get to the point to say, can I create this process, turn it into procedures for someone to replace me? Mm-hmm. And that's the conversation that you want to have with yourself. Is the ability to get more exposure is to be seen more, and the more that you're doing. Let's say for a landscaper, the more that you're digging the ditch, the more your company's getting exposure, because your job is to be out there, like you said, marketing and selling and promoting the benefits of your company overall. Otherwise, you go back to that same seat of you will never grow past your own calendar. And that really, to me, is the difference between a true entrepreneur and those who are freelancers. They understand that they must create and build processes both internally, not just in marketing, and which even gets us further down that rabbit hole to say, when you grow, your problems also grow. Yeah. And so the other conversation is, how do you learn how to scale your growth? And I think what I love about you, Brian, is you help entrepreneurs scale their voice, because you have created outlets of raving fans that want to hear that voice. Speak to that a little bit about your audience and who it is that you've really collected over the last decade through your books, your magazine, and also your radio show.
Yeah, I've gotten a chance to interview a lot of really amazing world-class people. So it's been awesome. Darren Hardy was an amazing guest. Marshall Silver was fantastic. Sharon Lecter was really great. Chris Powell has been on my show a couple times. He was the host of Extreme Weight Loss for 5 seasons on ABC. gosh, Jack Canfield, Mark Victor Hansen, they've been on my show. Tom Ziglar's been on a couple times. You've been on my show before.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then that's important to know. One of the things is you want, how did I get there? Because I worked really hard. I created a lot of trust, and it started with exposure and that credibility to say, here's Mark Victor Hansen on one side, and here's Joe Vitale on the other side, or here's Cody Spurger on one side, or here's even Laura Langmeyer on the other side, and you're sandwiched in between. That raises the vibration of people who want to be able to connect with me, because if they say, well, he is there, and she is there, and you're there, you must be someone that I need to meet, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's your association with people elevates you. And that's one of the reasons why I have a reviews page on my website. I don't call it a testimonials page. I call it a reviews page.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A little interesting flipping language there.
Yeah.
So I send that to people who I want to work with. And so they can see testimonials and reviews from Jeffrey Gitomer, Jack Canfield, UFC fighter Rich Franklin, Hal Elrod, James Malinchak, Michael Port, John DeMartini, just a lot of amazing people who have provided testimonials. Chris Powell, if you go to my calendar link, callwithbrian.com, at the top of the page, there's Chris Powell's testimonial for his appearance on my show. That's the first thing you see. You can't miss it. It's at the top of the page. If you go to my site, successprofilesmagazine.com, in the upper right-hand corner, there is a testimonial from Dr. Dennis Waitley. You cannot miss it. You scroll down that page a little further, there's a testimonial from Kevin Harrington. You can't miss it. Yep.
And one of the things I say is, we try so hard, we go to meetings, or we do Facebook odds, or we pay thousands of dollars to be found in search. And I tell people a lot of the times, Brian, I say, don't let a simple 1 or 2 page magazine contribution for $200 or $300 stop you from being seen. Because believe me, the nice thing about a magazine is it stays out there forever, in print, in digital. But not only that, it links back to your website. It has your phone number, but better yet, you don't know who's going to pick up that magazine one day and say, I read your article, or I saw your article next to Sharon Lecter's article, and I read yours as well, and I had to call. You don't know how many times I've had calls a year later, and people say, Oprah Winfrey picked me up, and now I'm going to be featured in her magazine, or this article got syndicated and now it's being sent out and I'm getting a royalty, or, I picked up a client, or I have a new partner. I get so much chatter, and I say chatter brings the cheddar, because someone took out the time and they said, you know what? I don't know where this is going to leave me, but I'm going to take this leap of faith to write something that's meaningful and matters, and know that eventually, or even immediately, that someone's going to pick it up and inquire about you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's priceless to be seen, but you have to be willing to do the work.
Yeah. Now, Brian, I have your contact information going across the screen here. Are there other ways that we can get a hold of you?
Yeah. If someone wants to schedule a call with me to talk about, potentially doing something magazine related, or maybe writing a book, callwithbrian.com, BRIAN, callwithbrian.com, and get on my calendar. I'd love to talk to you.
Well, Brian, I appreciate you being on the show here today. You've added so much value in the organization, the iNETrepreneur Network. You've been on our stage. You've been on the show before. You've given presentations and trainings at our chapter meetings. And I just want to say that I appreciate you for that. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur or a small business owner, come check this organization out. There's a lot of networking out there, but I say, there's 2 types of networking. There's good networking and bad networking, and I hope we're great networking. Brian, thank you so much for being on this show today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you so much. Well, again, I just want to remind everyone that the iNETrepreneur radio show and network is every Thursday from 2:30 to 3:30 Arizona time. And right now that also translates to Pacific time. Please come, subscribe, like us on Facebook. We also have an event coming up on September 21st and 22nd. It's the Art of Connection Summit. We will probably have 400 or 500 entrepreneurs from all around the world at that event. If you'd like to inquire more about that, attending or speaking on a panel, just get with me. I'm Robert at networktogether.net. That's Robert at networktogether.net. I hope everyone has an amazing and wonderful week. You have places to go and things to do, but you took some time to enjoy that time with us, and I want to say thank you for that. Have a great day.
You've been watching the iNETrepreneur Show, a production of the iNETrepreneur Radio Network, with host Robert W. Jones. Join Robert each week as he visits with new and exciting guests who inspire, teach, and mentor entrepreneurs worldwide. Follow Robert each Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Pacific, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, and 8:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time.